Welcome to the first of very many Let's Talk with Asian Sunday. Our very first topic is a topic on the shame conversation, a conversation about periods. Now, when I originally put an advert out to invite people to come and talk to us on our very first Let's Talk conversation, many of you applied, and I thank you for that. However, when I announced what the topic was, many of you also dropped out. So why are we so afraid? Why are we so scared to talk about periods? Let's find out from our panel today. Let me introduce you to Zafar Iqbal.
Hiya.
And we have Ishtiaq Ahmed, manager at mental health charity Sharing Voices.
Thank you.
We have Fanaz Khan, businesswoman and owner of Fit Britches.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
And finally, Tazim Suways, entrepreneur and businesswoman based here in Bradford.
Hello.
Right. So, thank you very much and welcome to the first Let's Talk with Asian Sunday. Thank you for agreeing to talk on a very taboo subject of periods. Yes, we're talking about the female menstrual cycle. Now, imagine this scenario. You're all sat at home, you're watching the TV, you're with your family, so parents, wife, kids, whatever, and all of a sudden an advert appears on your TV channels. And the advert is of sanitary towels, of tampons. How would you react in this particular scenario?
Change the channel, or does anybody want it from kitchen?
Really? So Zafar says he'd change the channel. What would you say, Ishtiaq? What would you do?
Nothing, I think, to just be silent, really. You just wouldn't discuss it. You'd wait till the advert's finished and that's it.
Would you feel uneasy, uncomfortable?
Yeah, I guess if the elders are sat around and your mum and dad are there and your sister's there, I guess there would be some kind of level of embarrassment. But, it's one of them subjects that, that we seldom talk about, so therefore you kind of ignore it.
And how would you feel, Tazzy?
Well, if I was watching it with my husband or my children, probably wouldn't think twice. Just let it go. Wouldn't discuss it. If I had my brother-in-laws and my brothers and my father sitting here and watching with me, I would most likely get up and I'll just switch the channel over for a couple of minutes and then just wait and then switch it back on again, because it's a subject that I don't think I would like to discuss in front of my father or my brothers.
And Fanaz?
I'm just picturing the scenario because I watch a lot of TV with my youngest, who's 8. So I'd be mortified if she started asking me questions. So yeah, I don't think I want to be explaining that to an 8-year-old. So ideally, I would like to switch the channel, but if she's cottoned on, then I'm going to have to come up with an alternative explanation. But apart from that, I think I would probably be oblivious to it. If I'm sat with my eldest, for example, actually my eldest might say something because we've got a very close relationship. So, she might end up saying something. But if it's the boys, I would probably just dismiss it and just there's nothing going on.
Yeah.
Would you ignore it?
Yeah.
So more or less, most of you have said that there would be an element of shame depending on who you sat with. Why do you feel like that?
I don't think it's shame, I think it's just embarrassment, as you say, having them to explain to your children who perhaps, are quite young, to explain to them what is a sanitary towel, how is it used, who uses it, why, then the whole kind of menstruation, how it happens. But I guess you're going to be confronted with explaining that to your children at some point, but it's just knowing when is the right
exactly.
time.
I think 8 is far too young, and I already feel really passionate about the fact that there's already a lot of discussion going on about the introduction of sex education to primary school children. So I don't want to go off topic a bit too much, but I do feel it's relative, and I just think it's way too early to be, discussing.
But then some would argue that 8-year-olds nowadays are very sharp and they understand So how long are you going to kind of
Not
hide?
every 8-year-old though. I mean, if
Well,
I was to look at my 8-year-old, yes, she's sharp, but is she ready for that level of education, that kind of education? No.
But for now, some girls start their menstrual cycle as early as 9, 10.
I understand
So she's only
that.
a year away.
Yeah.
And we've heard stories where some girls are so shy when they start that they are afraid to approach their parents, and having to use toilet roll or other means to deal with that monthly cycle and not have savage towels. So how would you deal with that?
I think with my girls, my relationship has been very open. I had my children young, so my children, the relationship that we've got is I've kind of grown up with my children. So I'm quite fortunate. I would say, I'm quite fortunate because my children can come to me, my girls can come to me and say, got an issue with this, or mummy, this has happened. Or so from that perspective, I think I'd be okay in the sense where I know my kids can come to me. Obviously, I can't answer for everybody, but that's just my personal
But as
perspective.
parents, we all like to believe that our children are going to come to speak to us. But there's certain things that they perhaps want to discuss and can't discuss with us as parents as well. Though we'd like to believe that they want to discuss everything.
Absolutely.
And just as like we're embarrassed to perhaps explain to the children about the menstruation cycle,
Yeah.
there's certain things that perhaps they're embarrassed to ask us as well.
I mean, fortunately with me, I've got 2 daughters. One's the eldest, one's the youngest. And again, the relationship that I've got with my daughters, obviously the relationship that they've got between them is different.
Sure.
And they're very close.
Yeah.
So if my youngest couldn't come to me, she would definitely go to her sister. But, it's good that we're actually having this discussion as well, because it's given me different perspectives and it's given me things to think about as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Plus, it's very common within the Asian community, especially us being Muslim and within the Muslim community, not to discuss that.
Yeah.
Then we can refer back to Hazrat Pak, peace be upon him, time. They used to do so many things with their wives and stuff like that. But we don't see that in today's generation.
No, we don't. That's the problem.
With the husband and wife, even like, forget the common Muslim, even like Maulvi Sahib in masjid. How many Maulvis do we see around the beach side having a race with their missus? We don't. How many Maulvis do we see sitting down and having ice cream with their missus? We don't. So for me to discuss period with my sister and mother, that's out of the question, just because of the cultural thing.
It is more cultural, definitely.
Yeah,
I agree.
I can't talk from a religious point of view because I don't have the research or information, and it'd be very false of me, right, to provide information on the record, and talk about religion and bring that into this topic. But from cultural, it's okay for me to not know. And the first time when I come across about period, it was like, I think when I was probably about 17, and I was with one of my friends, and she said she's on a period. And to be honest, all I thought, because at that time it was like in college, and I thought she meant a lesson. She's like, she missed or skipped a lesson, or she's missing and she's on a period. I said, that's cool. Then she explained to me, and I was like, what the heck she's talking about? And because we don't discuss it at home, and it's a cultural thing, and it's to be.
And we get away with hiding it so well as well, don't we? Because
it's like Zafar was saying, it's a cultural thing, and you're right.
Yeah.
It's hidden, but it's also quite seen as an impure situation for women.
Because I was just going to come on to that.
Religions, you mentioned religion.
Yeah.
In some religions, women are not even allowed to go into the kitchen. Because it's believed that they might impure the food.
For religious reasons.
For religious reasons, or even religious places of worship, for example, temples. Do you think we should be having a discussion about this and looking at, trying to change these perceptions and trying to change this view that, something so natural that happens, that is God-given, should, be challenged when people start looking at the women as being impure and not being allowed to engage in going into a simple place like the kitchen.
Absolutely, because it does kind of, as a woman, make you feel like you're some sort of second-class citizen. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And I remember growing up, and even now, to be honest with you, just say for example when it's Ramadan and you're fasting, or Alhamdulillah, I pray my Salah. So I can't literally, like, I've still got to act like I'm still fasting or I'm still praying, without the male members, i.e., if I'm with my brothers or something, without them cottoning on that, she's on. So I do get what you're saying. And I do kind of feel like, why should we feel like, we're in an impure state, or, why should we feel like, we're second class citizens? Because it's a perfect, natural,
What are your thoughts
cycle.
on this, Tazim?
I mean, I've always been a believer. Since when I was young, I was told that it's very impure. You can't read your namaz, and you can't fast, you can't touch the Quran,
Yeah.
you can't go into the mosque.
Yeah.
And I abided by these things because that was what was told of us. Obviously, I was too young to research these things myself, and so I just followed what our mothers and our grandmothers had told us. I think things are a lot more open now than they were. We're second generation Muslims here, and we had a lot more embarrassment and shame even talking to our mothers about it. And I think the third generation and the fourth generation, it's a little bit more open to do that, because I'm quite open with my daughter. But in terms of the us being made to feel inferior in a way and impure, it does make me feel like a second class citizen. And I always think that if God was to create us as second class citizens, then then so be it, but we're just as equally loved by Allah, we're equal to Allah, and this is just a natural a body function that takes place. Just as we naturally breastfeed our babies when they're born, this is just another natural function of our bodies, because those women carry the babies, and don't forget, when we're carrying the babies for 9 months, those periods stop. Why do they stop? So we need to question all this. What are we made of, and why are we made to be felt so impure and unholy?
Yeah, that's like a lack of education, because I mean, for a woman to be on a period, that's nature.
It's
And
totally natural.
yeah,
Exactly.
and for a man's, and even for a woman, because we have a right to discuss this now, and this is the right time to open up and talk. Like we were saying before we started recording the show, it's a communication, and nowadays, like, it's easier for us to communicate from opposite sex. Back then, this elder generations, there was no gap. There was a huge gap. There was no communication.
That's right.
They couldn't talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like, if a woman's on a period, fine, take her, go whatever you need to do. Nowadays, it's like it's a relationship is building up, whether it's a husband and wife or brother and sister, or like whatever the relationship is. So that communication, is open up. They can talk about things and share. And it's a nature. We need to discuss that.
It's a good point you make, Zafar. Communication, we need to discuss, and we're doing that here today. Although there have been a lot of people who were invited to the show but refused to come to talk because of the topic. So what made you agree to come and talk about such a taboo topic?
Well, we had, just to say on the funny line, they say Pablo ke saath par sing nahi hote, something like that. So it's one of those things. I mean, I'm happy to be part of it, and obviously I'm here now, with my consent. But at the same time, like, when I go back home, I'm a bit hesitant. Do I tell my sisters, my mom, wherever I've been? So just wait for the right time to probably tell them to watch this. That's just because cultural thing. But we as a man, I mean, with all, like, I think I'm kind of a bit feminine as well, because I've got my loads of sisters. But we need to respect that. We need to talk that and understand that and it's education, if you know what I mean. There's nothing wrong with it. That's nature. For a woman, it's important to have a period. Otherwise, there's a reason for the period, because for the kids, and. So and that's what it is. So we need to talk, but it's just like, because of communication, like I said before, we use so many references from Quran Majid, from Hadith and everything, but we only pick and choose is the one's the best.
Yeah.
Do you get it?
We pick and
I
choose
mean,
what
like,
we
there's
want to talk
5
about.
pillars of Islam. We don't do that. Do you get it? I mean, in namaz, we don't read 5 namaz, and we do dua. We want a big house. We want this and that stuff. But it all starts with salah. But so we bring a religion in when it applies to us. Otherwise, we don't. So it's a nature. We need to talk, respect the nature. We need to talk about the nature and understand about each other. There's no one like in second citizen, whether it's Islam or non-Muslims. Man and woman, they are equal. They're created by God, and if their paradise lies under them, feet of your mother.
Yeah. So what was the reason you came on the show to talk about the
Well,
topic?
I mean, for me personally, I think it's about getting other people's kind of perspectives. But I think essentially what we're talking about here is cultural attitudes and how different cultures perceive things. So in this instance, I mean, I'm not too sure whether women are made to feel inferior. Okay, if we're talking from a religious perspective, there are certain rulings that that there is a state of impurity, so we can't get away from that.
Yeah,
That's,
absolutely.
that is factual
Agree with you on
information.
that, yes.
So therefore, during that menstruation cycle, female is expected not to touch the holy ground.
Obviously,
or to
yes,
read the
absolutely.
Absolutely fine.
But from my personal experience, I don't think women are made to kind of feel inferior or less important because they're on
No,
their
but
kind of
we're
menstruation.
expected to, or we have been expected to for a very long time, hide the fact that we can't say openly, oh, I'm on my periods, that's why I'm not reading.
I don't think I
No,
would.
no,
I
you're
would
right.
still be able
Yeah,
to
That's
do
why
that.
I'm not
but look,
praying.
I guess there is a kind of an undercover kind
We're
of
always having to
understanding,
make
right?
another
Yeah.
excuse,
That
aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because from my experience, I mean, I've got sisters and a wife, and and I think if anything, there is a level of empathy and understanding when somebody is on their kind of menstruation cycle to say have some rest, or I'll do the cooking, or I'll do the cleaning and the hoovering. So if anything, I don't think I guess the inferiority comes from the fact that there is not an open debate on
That's
this
it,
issue.
yeah.
Where everybody knows what's going on, what
Yeah.
happens on a monthly
Yeah.
basis. We just talk about it.
Yeah.
Equally, you can say, as couples who have sexual intercourse don't openly talk about those
Yeah.
kind of, but yet it happens. So does that mean because it's a natural thing that do we discuss it openly? Do you understand?
Yeah.
I still wouldn't
Yeah.
discuss it openly, even to this day. I would not discuss it because for me, I feel it's my privacy.
Absolutely,
It's
yeah, I
It
agree.
would be an invasion of
Yeah.
my privacy.
Yeah.
It's my body.
It's personal sanctity.
Yeah. But what we would like is people to be able to respect that
That's
and
it.
not think that she's dirty.
Yeah.
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 You are right.
She's
You know,
articulated that so perfectly.
We are, unholy. Okay, I agree with all that, but I don't want people to think, don't touch what she's touched because she's dirty.
So do you think
She's
that
not really.
happens? Do you think that happens?
I think in people's minds, you
Look,
would see that.
maybe in people's minds, but I mean, have your partner ever says to you that don't cook because you're on your kind of period this week?
Well, then he would have to cook. Your partner would have to cook, and if they don't want to cook, they wouldn't say that.
Yes, you can cook. You
You
can
can cook, but you're like,
No, but coming on to that point as well, when a woman's had a baby,
Yeah.
there is culturally a period, and they call it the 40 days
40
period,
days,
the
yeah.
Dahlia period.
Yeah.
And I have heard of scenarios, especially in places like Pakistan and India, where women can't even touch anything because it's considered impure.
oh, yeah, she's breastfeeding the baby.
Yeah.
And the breast milk is pure.
Yeah.
She's in a unholy state. She's in a.
But hang on, but when we say
That's it.
unholy, who says it's unholy?
Well, that's what it's classed as. It's classed as impure.
Impure.
Because I know it
Yeah.
happened to someone very close to our family. She gave birth to her first child, and then her in-law said, she used to sleep on the floor. at
Yeah,
night and
keep
for
her out of
40
the
days.
way, yeah.
And that's the first time that we come across. Holy, does that happen?
Yeah.
So we didn't know that after 40 days.
Yet she's
"You're
feeding
not
the
barking,
baby."
You have to sleep on the floor.
From that very body,
Yeah.
that's classed as impure.
So
She's feeding milk.
How do we change these perceptions then? Obviously,
Educating
it's-
people and let them understand it's okay to talk about it, and talk about it for the right reason. Us guys living in a country where you can talk about stuff, where you can go into each other's privacy, but don't disturb them. Just learn about it, then walk away.
But then
from
some would argue, well, why do we need to have this open public discussion on this issue?
I don't know but somehow you can help. It's like first.
Well, I'm playing devil's advocate
I would-
here
I
in the
would
sense
have
that
it
why
open.
would
It's
we?
like, no, not open like, but I mean, it's a good idea to talk. Somehow you can help in one another way. It's like first time I come across it was like when I was 17, I think. But before that, I didn't know.
Well, some might class this as sex education. It's
Yeah.
part of sex education.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So,
which is
yeah.
what I said earlier.
I think if we talk about the younger girls more than anything, they're really ashamed about it. Where does that shame come from? Is it an automatic thing that we don't even tell our mothers about it? Like going back to your first question about if a 10-year-old doesn't is too ashamed to tell her mum
I think
that
it's
she's
just,
on her
it's
period.
about emotions,
How do we
isn't
go
it?
back to
It's emotions.
your question about why are we talking about this in the first place? I think it's really, really important that we do talk about it, because as a girl as young as 9 could start her periods.
And just to
But isn't
clarify
that-
what Taz
But
means.
isn't that the kind of, isn't that parental responsibility for the mother maybe expects to explain to her
But
daughter?
at what age?
Right, yeah. Well, 9, 10, 11, whenever it's appropriate, right, yeah, to say that there will come a time when you will be menstruating, this was what happens, this is what it entails, and you know, you need to buy a sanitary towel. So, then some would argue, well, if that discussion's been had with the, you know, with the daughter, then why have an open discussion about it?
Well, I'm going back to a recent article in The Independent, and
We'll come on to that. I think you know, we were asking the question of, so how do we change the perceptions of unholy, impure, and in some cases some believe it's inferior to women as well. I mean, what would you say to that, Fernaz?
It's a difficult one, you know. How do we change perceptions? Because you know, this is one of many issues that we have in society today, and I do believe that, you know, the only way that we can do that is by having, you know, open discussions like this, you know, is by education, because that's where it all stems from. But you know, I haven't got all of the answers, unfortunately.
Do you guys share a view?
The only way we
I mean, I think I said this before. I says, you know, as humans, you know, married couples who have sexual intercourse, right? Yeah, even attitudes towards that is considered to be dirty or unholy, right?
Yeah.
And we don't talk about it, right? Yeah. But does that require then an open debate,
Yeah.
you know, about, you know, sexual intercourse, right? Yeah. Okay. In the same way as attitudes are towards menstruation, right? Yeah. So, you know,
very good question. I mean, the question that you ask is, do we need to have this discussion openly today?
That's right, yeah.
The other side of the discussion, and this is what Tazim was referring to earlier, we've got the discussion of shame surrounding periods. Now there's a discussion of poverty surrounding, you know, women who are on periods. You might have heard there's a Bollywood film that's being made at the moment that's releasing soon called Pad Man. And sounds funny. And it's based on a true story on a gentleman in South India who, after getting married, realised that his wife, every time she was on her menstrual cycle, wasn't able to afford sanitary towels, and as a result was using a dirty cloth for her time of the month. And he found this to be very unhygienic, and he was trying to convince her to use the family budget to go and buy sanitary towels. He later then decided to take it upon himself to empower not just his wife, not just his sister and mum, but other women by inventing his own sanitary towel machine, which would produce them at a lower cost, but also be able to give those machines to other villages so that women there could make their own. And during this process, he was actually ostracised by his own family, by his mum, by his sisters, and they refused to join him in his experiment to test out the pads that he was making. So he ended up testing them out on himself. But they say that in places like India and Pakistan, and that story's become quite an inspiring story, obviously, for it to be made into a film as well. Now, they say that places in India and Pakistan, women are so poor that they end up using things like sand and leaves and really unhygienic things to support them during their menstrual period. And it seems to be that there's a lot of talk and a lot of debate, especially in newspapers here in this country as well, suggesting that girls here are also facing poverty and they can't afford sanitary towels, and as a result are missing school.
Yeah.
And I think that's the topic that Tazim wanted to talk about, and you wanted to share your views about an article that you read which highlights this. I mean, do you want to elaborate a bit more on what you were going to say?
Yes, I mean, the article that I read was in The Independent, I think it was a few weeks ago, and there was a police officer who was working with a group of schools in Leeds, and they couldn't understand why a lot of the young girls were skipping schools, you know, for 3 or 4 days at a time. And eventually he got to the bottom of it, and he realised that a lot of the girls are skipping because they were on the menstrual periods, and they couldn't afford sanitary towels. and therefore they were skipping school. And they linked that to poverty. And they said that it's because the majority of them were from single parent households with 5 mouths to feed, and the last thing they wanted their mother was to give them a few pennies for, or some money for sanitary towels. And the article further states that they want the charity organisations that are working abroad in Africa and Gambia and various other places to come back home and look at the poverty here. Now they also said that it was linked to poverty, and it's not just Muslims that we're talking about here. It's the white population as well. So in the white population, there was one line in that article that said that there was a shame factor there, that the girls were too embarrassed. Now I don't know whether that was too embarrassed to ask because they were ashamed to tell the parents that they were on the periods, or ashamed because the parent wouldn't have any money to give to them and they wanted siblings to be fed. But it said that it costs around about £20,000 in a woman's lifetime to buy these products. Now when I did my little bit of working out, I did some comparisons on internet with all the markets. The cheapest one that was coming out was with Aldi, I believe, at 55 pence for 14 pads. And at 55 pence, 14 pads in my opinion is enough, but let's say you want to double that for the month, 28 pads, which is about just over £1. And so when you link the poverty factor up, that pound, it will be £12 a year. And if you link that up for 40 years, if the natural life cycle of a woman having her period, you're talking like just under £500, in your lifetime. Maybe you could go to £600. So I didn't know where the figure 20,000 came from, unless they went for the top-notch sanitary towels. Even if you go for the top-notch, I couldn't see that. But then I started linking that up with at least 77% of young children at school, teenagers, have mobile phones. So obviously they have a mobile phone, they're paying for the SIMs on contract, or pay as you go. That costs money. But let's cast that to one side, and let's talk about smoking. And at least over 5% of the teen population, 5 in 100, are smoking at that age.
So between 11 to 15. Trying to say, Tazim, that it's not affordability when it comes to sanitary towels or tampons even. It's still the shame. It's the shame factor, but if it is the affordability, it's because that money that would have been available for sanitary towels is being spent on other non-essential items. But is that because it's easier to ask for pocket money for those items than it would be to ask for sanitary towels? It could be a little bit of both. It depends who you're talking about here.
So then we're coming back onto the shame factor, because it's funny how you mentioned Africa, because I was looking at a project, a social enterprise project, quite a while ago actually, and we were looking at Africa because obviously there's a lot of schoolgirls that are actually affected there, and from the research that I'd gathered, these girls were actually skipping a week from school, but then they never went back to school because of the shame factor. And as a result of that, that's one of the reasons why there's so many NGO and projects over there that are trying to change that, because by keeping girls in education and at school, it's actually not only breaking that stereotype, but it's empowering and encouraging women to become educated, because it's females that are actually the first role models, to their children.
But you educate the mother, you educate the nation.
That's it,
But just going back to this, if a packet of cigarette costs £11 odd per packet, and you're talking, if you buy cheap pads, which are affordable, less than 5p per pad, then it is affordable. So I think the affordable factor is less.
And it's
possibly
a shame factor,
more. But also it's the fact that there's other things.
I think it may be the case in certain developing countries that work attitudes are not as quite open as they are in developed countries like the UK here. But but I'm not sure whether there's that correlation between poverty and deprivation and the kind of affordability of sanitary towels, as you say. You mentioned that 50 pence. Okay, maybe they're worth £3 a month, or whatever. It can't be any more than £5 a month.
No.
So I'm not quite sure when you say the kind of shame factor. How is the shame factor kind of.
I think they're too embarrassed to ask for the money. To ask for the money for that. But
well, surely when a mother, I mean, you guys are all mothers as well. Surely when your daughters are, about to come on or whatever, you have an inkling, don't you? Really, that maybe now it's time for me to maybe talk to my, daughters.
There's a lot of people out there that are not.
Maybe they're not.
To do that.
But what I'm saying is that I reckon.
So if you're saying they're not, how do we encourage them to?
It's through education, through the schools. I mean,
so we go back to the question of sex education.
I know, it's awkward, isn't it? I know.
Right, yeah, in that sense. And it's also, sex education is not...
See, the
always
problem
be
is...
seen as kind of a derogatory in the sense or in a negative way.
No, it's not.
It's also about changing people's attitudes towards women and sex.
But then it's about ensuring we need to look at the curriculum. We need to look at, what exactly is being educated. Because if you look at the proposals... sex education, it's not just, we're not talking about periods here, we're talking about trying to get children to understand adult relationships, LGBT relationships, and that to me is a massive concern, because how do you try and get a 5-year-old to understand something that is beyond their comprehension, really?
Okay.
But going back to sex education, I think menstrual cycle is covered in that.
Yeah.
So the girls will be aware of it, but it still goes back to the shame factor. They're still embarrassed and ashamed. Because, I'll give you an example. When we were supposed to have sex education in school, I skipped that day because I knew there was going to be boys and girls in that class, and that we were going to be laughed at. Yeah. We were going to be jeered at, and didn't want to go in that day.
So what's changed?
The boys were just as embarrassed.
We're having a discussion.
I think older, wiser.
Yeah.
When you are 11, you are too ashamed.
It is very embarrassing.
You are too ashamed to go into a changing room, a communal changing room, and change your costume. Whereas at this age, if you're going to a swimming bath and there's a communal changing place there, you don't think twice. Yeah. You're not that much body ashamed as you are at age of 11 or 9.
She's right, because I remember when we had to do it in primary school, all of the girls were literally taken to embarrassed. So they picked up on that, which was really good of them. So then they ended up ensuring that girls had a separate and separate group discussion as well about it, so that they didn't feel embarrassed later in front of the boys.
Can I ask, are you embarrassed talking about this subject today openly with Ishtiaq, with Zafar, with two of them?
I'll be honest with you, initially when I came in, because I didn't know we were having this discussion, otherwise I might have opted out, I'm joking.
Before we started the film though, we did...
Yeah, you did tell me, and you did kind of ask, how do you feel about talking about the subject, and I said, what a pain, no pun intended. But as we've started having this discussion, I'm quite comfortable. I am.
I think that's only because of two reasons. One, we adults. Second, we lack educated. We are aware of the nature and we can talk about it. And most of you guys, you're parents, so it's easier to talk about things like that. But for me, because I don't have kids at the moment, and it's just a bit it's a slow. I'm in the first gear.
If you had a panel here, if you had a panel here of 16-year-olds and 12-year-olds, you may have giggles and embarrassment.
And a completely different viewpoint,
perspective. And possibly you might have, maybe not the girls not being involved. If you had 11, 12-year-olds talking about this, and it would be a good idea to ask them, why
so do you think that if they watch this, because this will be on our web series on social media, this debate, this dialogue would be quite helpful for those 16 or younger girls?
I think it would be very, very helpful, and I think if they are embarrassed and they are ashamed about it, nobody's asking you to go and talk to your father about it or your brothers about it, or if you don't
talk
feel
to somebody you trust.
But talk to somebody you trust. Talk to
somebody you're comfortable with.
Or talk to at least talk to your mother, talk to your auntie about it. Don't go without sanitary towels. It's
and don't feel like you can't talk about it.
Don't feel you're alone in the world. You really do need to talk to even your school teacher. Even talk to your teacher about it.
Yeah, there should be a first part of call.
And then going back to this article again. In this article, it did say that the teachers were actually going out and buying the sanitary towels because there was an affordability factor. But me personally, looking at the prices that are involved, its affordability is less, but I think there's lots of other things that come as a priority, like the cigarettes and the mobile phones, that come as a priority before the sanitary towels. But having said that, if there are 4 or 5 young girls in the house, it can become a burden.
Yeah, I was just about to come on to that.
You know, sometimes I have 4 or 5 daughters.
Yeah.
But then the other issue I have is that if there is a father, a single parent father, and I know of many fathers that have got daughters that he's bringing up, and those daughters, you know, he's going out shopping and he's buying the sanitary towels for his daughters. So it is happening there, and it's a shameful, it's a taboo subject. Really, it shouldn't be.
It's a taboo subject, but I've just thought of something else as well. I think one of the main points that we're actually missing here is the health risk factors that are involved, because it's all about hygiene. It's all about hygiene, but what seems to be missing from the debate is the fact that, or what seems to be missing from everything, you know, from a whole picture sort of scenario, is girls basically being educated on the fact that, look, you know, there is a health risk here, and you know, there is a responsibility, you know, whether it's parental responsibility or whether it's responsibility on the girls, but they need to take responsibility for the fact that, look, this could affect you in the long run. And there is a risk involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's personal hygiene issues.
It is,
really,
yeah.
in that
But what did
sense.
it do when the pads were not invented?
Well, this is what I was going to say. For hundreds, if not thousands of years, women have not used sanitary towels.
Because there has been
Whatever
stuff.
other
There has been
methods
stuff
they
in
have
the.
used.
I read an article the other day about some woman. I think was it in the Independent, that wore her pad for too long. So
Tampon
Yeah.
for too long and she had to,
It's toxic shock syndrome
toxic
that you
shock
can get.
syndrome, yeah.
I mean, whoever's watching this, first thing they need to know, right, it's a nature. Yeah, it's okay to talk about it, and you must talk about it, and you must find out what's the purpose of it. Yeah, so there's a reason for everything. So once they come up with that, once they learn that bit, then it's okay for them, right? And all the guys that are watching here, they need to understand that as well, about their sisters, about their female friends, mothers, aunties, everything. It's part of the nature. It's okay to talk about it, but obviously being Asian and Muslim, you know, we got to respect our culture as well at the same time. But then how do
I agree with you.
you know, and educate people without disrespecting the culture, because
Yeah,
the culture
definitely.
identifies
And the
us
religion.
wholly.
absolutely,
religion.
absolutely.
So we got to respect the culture, we got to respect the religion, then we got to
So
respect
we're running
this
out of
issue.
time now, so we're going to wrap up quickly. And just the final point to make before we wrap up, I think you know, it's very important that you gave that message out to girls and boys. Because a lot of boys don't tend to know anything about periods until very later in life, once they're perhaps married.
Yeah.
I mean, you yourself said that you found
It
out
was
when you
about
were 17.
I think it was, yeah.
And, you know, do you think that boys equally should receive education and information
It should, 'cause
around women's periods?
just purely speaking,
And I don't know if you would mind sharing when you first found out and how it was for you. Obviously, you've already told us, Ephra.
it was a strange
I don't know
experience.
if Ishtek wants to share his
Yeah,
views.
I mean, the first time I heard of it, I think it must have been about 15, 16. I had a female white friend, Kirsty, who I was very close friends with, and she talked to me about it, and I couldn't get my head around this thing. And of course, in those days, there was no Google, so it was a case of going to the central library, right, on the 7th floor, and trying to pick out a book, right, you know, well, nobody's watching. Well, nobody's watching. In amongst other books, right, and then trying to read about it. So that's how, you know, I kind of became
Was that helpful
inquisitive.
then for you when you
Yeah, of course it
later
was.
got married?
It kind of
because you
puts
knew
things
before?
into context, doesn't
Yeah.
it? It really contextualises it. So I've got a friend of mine who's telling me that she bleeds every month, and I'm thinking, why on earth? What, you know?
Yeah.
So I couldn't understand. So, you know, I had to understand it from a biological kind of medical perspective. This is what happens, you know. So then I was able to kind of understand.
Can you imagine their first reaction? Oh my God, are you ill?
It's bad enough bleeding from a top, but then to bleed every month, right? Yeah.
Is it serious?
Knowing what you know, does that help you be, you know, you mentioned the word empathetic earlier. You know, when your wife, it's that time of the month for her.
Yeah.
You know, helping her around the house, doing stuff.
Yeah,
Do
of
you-
course. I
do you
think from a
tend
male
to do little bit
perspective, it's
more
about, you
to
know,
support
being
her?
mindful and understanding.
That's great.
You know, to be supportive, really, in that sense. I mean, we keep talking about, we need to have an open discussion. You know, I mean, you know, for your partner to menstruate every month, I don't think you have to have it.
Every month? No.
Discussion about it, right? Yeah.
I think
like,
it's
you
more
know,
about understanding.
It's just about understanding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's all there is, right?
Understanding,
Yeah.
mutual tolerance, and respect.
But if anything, when
That's
you're
it.
talking about open discussion, I think it's about having that open discussion, you know, with females growing up at the
Yeah.
age of 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
I think it's important that they need to have that open
Absolutely,
discussion,
absolutely.
and so that they are mentally
Yeah.
and physically prepared for
Absolutely.
it.
And I think it's a
Yeah.
mother's
And it's
responsibility,
I think it
or
is
the,
the
or
mothers,
the person who
or the
has the
school
parental,
nurses, or the teachers.
parental
you know,
responsibility
whatever, yeah.
to teach your daughters,
That's right,
or
yeah.
at least tell them
Yeah.
and make them aware of it,
Yeah.
and say to them, look, I'm your mother, I'm your friend, and when this happens, don't be
Yeah.
ashamed, come to me. And I think
That's
that's
right,
where
yeah.
we're lacking.
Yeah.
That's where the lacking is. And I think there's some work that needs to be done around.
I think things have improved over the last 20 years.
Definitely,
in this
yeah,
country.
definitely.
So I think, perhaps not as bad as it used to be.
No.
Well, thank you very much, guys. Thank you for sharing your views on a
Thank
very
you for having us.
difficult topic, a topic that has been taboo for a number of years in many, many communities.
Still is.
In many cultures, still is, perhaps. But thank you for sharing your views, and we hope that our viewers can take something back from the advice that you've given and from the thoughts that you've shared. That's it from us from this month with Let's Talk with Asian Sunday here in Bradford. See you next month.